So we rendered out, or at least I rendered out my scene last class, but I just want to go back over the settings in the render settings for everyone.
How do you get to render settings?
It's the one with the cog, the settings cog.
So you click that, okay.
Or Control B.
Control. B as in boy.
B as in boy, yeah. So now that we're in our render settings, a couple things that we want to make sure is we set our width and height resolution to 960 by 540. And then below this we want to set our frame range to all frames. This will make sure that we render our whole camera animation, which will be important. You don't want to render only half your scene, for example. And then we want to move down to the Save tab over here. So we want to have Save checked on in both places to make sure it saves our file. And then we want to make a folder. So I've already got my folder made and I've already got my frames, but I'll just trace back through my steps. So my file on the P drive, this is where my project is, and then I made a folder called Desk Render Sequence, or Desk Render, or Assignment 1 Render, whatever you want to call it, just to make sense of what it is. And then click into that folder. Yours for the first time will be blank, so ignore all these thumbnails, and then enter in a name down here. So I just called it assignment _1 _ desk _ my last name. It's good practice to use underscores or some other character instead of spaces. File paths typically don't do too well on most systems if you have spaces, periods, or forward or backward slashes. Those are all things that you want to avoid. And that's just kind of a general computer thing, not specific to this class thing. So once that's all set up, I can click Save, and that doesn't mean render, that just means that you're confirming that location. One other important thing that I might have glossed over, but if you didn't do it, if you missed this step, that's fine, but just note it going forwards. The file name that you want to pick the last one on the list, and this is name dot a bunch of zeros dot the file extension, and this is going to name your files in a way that when you open them up in Finder, they will open up chronologically. So it'll show you from 0 to 150, as opposed to showing you like 100 and then 10 and then 11 and then whatever, some other number. And then lastly, the anti-aliasing, we want to just set this to best. So with all that taken down, we are ready. It's always a good point now at this time to save. I can see that I've got a little asterisk on my file, which is telling me that I should save because I've made changes to this file. You never know, a render could crash and the whole computer could lock up and you might lose a file if you didn't save diligently, so that's always bad. And then you should be ready to render just by clicking this Render to Picture Viewer button right here. Shortcut for that is Shift R. And then you'll get a pop-up. The picture viewer will pop up and it'll have like a whole bunch of stuff going through here. It'll take some amount of time. You'll see like a little timeline, progress bar, and all that good stuff. You'll see a list of your frames on the right. That's all cool and dandy. So mine's all done. So I'm going to pretend that this is all completed. Well, not pretend. I don't have to pretend. Mine is done. So the next step will be to open up After Effects. so that we can make our movie file, and we can just
So
find.
this is after it's rendered.
Right. So once it's done rendering, you don't want to interrupt the middle of the rendering. You want to sit and wait for it to finish. You can hit your Windows key and type After Effects, or you can go find it in the programs somewhere. But I just use the Windows key because this is easy. So then you click After Effects. It'll open up after about a year, and then you'll be in After Effects. Show of hands, who has ever opened After Effects? 3 hands, alright. So it's not a requirement by any means in this class. We're not going to be doing anything too fancy. We can close this pop-up. These pop-ups are awful. So to explain a couple things about After Effects interface, the real basic stuff is we've got in the middle here, this is kind of like our viewport. This is where we'll see stuff. You've got a timeline down here at the bottom, and then you've got some other bells and whistles and all of that good stuff. So over here on the left, this is our project bin. This is where we will import our file, and we can do that by going to File, Import File, or you can just double click in this open space over here. This is typically what I do. So I double clicked, and then I'm going to navigate to my render folder, and I'm going to single left click the first frame, and it'll select this sequence, and I want to make sure that this check mark for TIFF sequence is on. This is an important checkbox. This is about the hardest part of this process. It's making sure this checkbox is on, and then I can click Import. And I can verify that it imported as a sequence because this little icon is kind of like a film strip. It looks like there's a couple images stacked as opposed to it just being one strip. If I import this without the check mark on, you'll see that this is a different icon. So you don't want that icon, you want this icon. And you can see it's talking about like our frames per second and our length and our resolution and all that. This is all familiar stuff from Cinema 4D. So that's good. I can tell that it is imported correctly. And now the next step to bring it into the timeline, because right now it's imported, but we're not doing anything with it. You want to click and drag this the file that you imported, and drag and drop it onto this button right here, which is the New Composition button. It is the 3rd button from the left on the project bin. So when I let go, and again you can see here when I mouse over it, it says Create a New Composition, this button. We'll see that a bunch of stuff happened in the timeline. We now have something visible over here. So now down here in the timeline, we can see that our file is here, and just like in Cinema 4D, you've got a little time marker that you can drag around, and I can see that my whole animation's here in all of its glory. And that's about it. As far as like using After Effects, we're not going to do any fancy trickery. We'll learn some more After Effects stuff in the next assignment. So now to save this out, that's the only thing that we have left to do. We want to go up to Composition, up at the top, Composition, Add to Render Queue. It says our hotkey here is Control M. Although I don't really use the Control M hotkey because they change that seemingly every version. It's been Control M, it's been Control Shift M, it's been Alt M throughout my time using After Effects, so I kind of just ignore the fact that it has a hotkey. So then I just click Add to Render Queue, and we can see now that the timeline looks a little bit different if I just drag this up a bit so that we can see it. I now have these two tabs, and I'm in the Render Queue tab. So this is all good. So now I need to set the settings for my render. This is again an important part. So I'm going to click this blue word that says lossless, clicking the blue word itself, and we'll get a pop-up. So in this pop-up, this is our format settings. So if you know anything about video encoding or anything like that, we know that the AVI format is kind of awful. It's pretty crappy, not very well supported by much. So we're going to change it to QuickTime. QuickTime is pretty well supported. And now that I set that to QuickTime, the second step of this format is to click Format Options, and we'll get another pop-up. These pop-ups are great. And I want to change my video codec from animation down to H.264. I'll leave that up for a second. So there's a lot of settings in this list. This list is actually long enough to have like a scroll up and down. But H.264 or H.264 is a pretty almost ubiquitously used format online. It's pretty much anytime you watch a video on, well, no, YouTube now uses H.265, but prior to like a year ago, YouTube and most websites, they display H.264 video, so that's why we're going to use that. So then I can click OK, and click OK, close that out. And the last step now is we want to make sure the output to section, this says, right now it says not yet specified because we haven't told it where to save the file. So if we click that, I will then just go to my P drive, find my file, and then I'm just going to save it into my folder. I can just click Save. So this is just telling the program where to save the file, not too complicated. And we now see that this big blue render button is now lit up, and we're ready to click it. So we'll click it, and this will convert all those images into a movie file. And if you have your headphones plugged in, you'll hear an extremely loud chime noise. Extremely loud. It's definitely woken me up sometimes when I've fallen asleep at my computer while rendering. And that's about it. That's done. So we want to go to our folder and turn this in now. So I've got my assignment 1 desk assignment. I'm going to copy this. Or actually, I'll probably just open up to, yeah. So now to turn it in onto the server, which is where you will turn in your work, all your work, you want to go to the SR127 room, because that is this room. And then you will just follow along where your class is. So we are 2510. And I teach on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And I've got my name here. And then this is assignment 1. So you will put that in the aptly named assignment 1 turn-in folder. And then we can just paste it. Or you can drag it over, however you would like to get it there. And that is it. Your file is turned in, and it will be graded as soon as possible.